I am walking back and forth. You know, something so simple shouldn't take me out, but man, this just works. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did. If you haven't already, go like, share, subscribe to the channel, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. So just got back from the theaters. Yes, I went into the theaters to watch The Suicide Squad as opposed to watching it on HBO Max. Full theater, full Dolby theater. That's why the main reason why I went in there. I just wanted to get the Dolby sound. I feel like with these DC movies, I need to give sort of caveats to where I stand with the DCE universe. The films, for the most part, I have not been a fan of. I feel like each of them have had something that really works while failing at multiple other things. I think for me, some of the films that I enjoyed the most from them are without a doubt Birds of Prey, the first Wonder Woman. Besides that last act gets a little wonky, and the Zack Snyder full length Justice League. Then the rest just starts going, sort of going down from there. But I think outside of Suicide Squad and the first Suicide Squad and BVS and that Justice League, the others do all have something that really does work. I think Man of Steel is a gorgeously shot and it takes its time. And I like the first act and a half of that movie. Just when it gets so bombastic at the back end, I started losing some of the heart. This film, James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, a simple article is not going to really differentiate enough. You needed to put something, even if it's a colon, just Suicide Squad, the good one. That works. But this is the first film that sort of feels like it does everything correctly. As far as feels like a big time comic book film. It has the heart, it has the comedy, and what you don't really expect from these type of films is that it goes violent, and it goes violent a lot. The violence sometimes swings from one way to the other. I'll talk about that in a minute. But it has sort of everything that put it in a pot of gumbo and it just feels right. Whereas it looks beautiful like Man of Steel, but it also has the heart of something like Shazam. But it has character moments that Birds of Prey does. So it's sort of the perfect world of this, and it's become probably I'm gonna repeat watch this, especially while it's on HBO Max. I can just cut it on whenever I want for the next 30 days. Um, it's going to be something that I watch again because I just there are a lot of just character beats and character moments that actively work in this movie. I think it would be remiss to say that like James Gunn, his comedic timing and his for these especially for ensemble films is pretty high up there, and he knows what he's doing from Guardians of the Galaxy. This doesn't feel like Guardians. This doesn't feel as big or as family friendly or four quadrantly as Guardians of the Galaxy. This feels more like what would happen if the director of Slither got to do a comic book movie, which is obviously it's the same person, but it just feels like he's coming right off of that because there are some violent swings that this movie has, and it does teeter that line of becoming between violence for effect and comedy beats or becoming gratuitous. And that's where sometimes it loses a little bit of it for me because some of the violence and some of the gore borders on being overly cartoony and can kind of like, all right, I know that I'm watching a comic book movie, but for a lot of what's happening here, you take a lot of the stuff serious. So which are we? Are we going to be super comedic or are we going to be super graphic and kind of just in realism? It doesn't happen too much. The pendulum swings pretty consistently, and it doesn't. I don't think go one way or the other because usually it reels it back in with a heartfelt moment. But it's just one of those things that sometimes it can kind of be jarring to have something that looks so real one moment, and then you're like, "Ha! Someone's head just exploded and guts are all over the place." Don't know what to really do with that. But once you sort of get the rhythm and the tone of it all, it works. This movie opens with a cold open that I will not ruin for anybody. I think you need to see it to believe it and just see what it is that James is doing. And then once we get the story going, I love the flow and the beats of everything. And there's some great character moments. I think for me, this is I love Birds of Prey, but I think this is by far, it has two of my favorite Harley scenes that exists in any of the live action stuff. One of them is a massive action sequence that is fun, and the other is sort of a heartfelt character moment that happens, sort of a realization of a lot of the trauma that she's gone through, and it's played a little bit for laughs, but it's clear that she's going through a lot of pain, and it comes off quite well. I think this is a movie that does give the main team that you are with a lot of good heart moments and heartbeat moments that really work. Specifically, Ratcatcher 2, Harley, and Bloodsport. Speaking of Bloodsport, Idris is phenomenal. He's great. He's the gravitas and the weight of the film, as is Viola, as Amanda. I mean, she is probably the overarching big bad of this, where we do get into a big fantastical big bad in Starro towards the end. Very comic booky. I mean, it's a character. It's a piece of character in literature that exists, but it's it's larger than life. This Starro works better for me than the whatever the Enchantress was doing in the first Suicide Squad, just because I still don't have any relevancy or attachment or anything that's worked for that. Is just Enchantress pointing up to the sky and doing some weird gyrations. It just doesn't play well. Whereas this plays a little bit better because at this point the big bad is still Amanda, who is sort of puppeteering all of these folks, and that is who they are trying to kind of go against, as opposed to this big fantastical being, kaiju, if you will. There are some really well done action sequences. I loved a lot of the visuals in this. There's a fight sequence that happens between. If I talk about it too much, it's going to be spoilers. But there's a fight sequence where someone's helmet is being used as their shot, and you're seeing the shot via the reflection of that, as opposed to seeing. It's just it's a really really well done shot. There, James is having a freaking ball with this. I think when James is allowed to play with his own devices and get that R rating, he has a lot more fun being the sadistic and weird person that he is. King Shark is great, super funny, super heartfelt. He's sort of like the big lug that you kind of take around. Ratcatcher has a pretty solid backstory. It sort of feels a little kind of shoehorned because you don't really get her beats until about 3/4 of the way into the film. It feels a little like, oh yeah, we want to give her a story. Let's take a moment, but it plays within the flow of everything, so it doesn't really jar out or mess up anything. The one issue that I have is the Peacemaker. And not because I don't think John Cena does a bad job, he does fine, but it is a character that is by design you're not supposed to care that much for, and you don't. And you can see the writing is on the wall as to what's going to happen with these characters, and so you can kind of see it telegraphed. At least I could telegraph from quite a ways earlier. And so when the film ends and you stick around, you should stick around. And for those who are in the know, the Peacemaker is getting his own series. It's a series that, after watching this film, I just don't care about. Like, of all the characters that we have between Harley, Polka Dot Man, Ratcatcher 2, King Shark, and he would be the one that I care the least about. And I don't know if that's by design, but I after watching this film, I don't need to see a show about him. The people that I am left with caring the most about would be Bloodsport, Harley, King Shark, and Polka Dot Man. You give me more of them, I might be a little bit more interested. I don't know if it's that John's not charismatic enough for the Peacemaker, or the Peacemaker is not fleshed out enough, but sure. I also think that with that knowledge, or even the post-credit sequence, does take a bit of the sting out of the climax or pre-climax of this film. I'm trying not to spoil anything, but whatever happens in this movie is the weight of it or the importance of it is sort of lackluster and taken aback a bit in the exact same film. It's similar to, while it didn't happen in the same film, but let's say in Avengers, if when Loki kills Coulson, and in that very same movie, Coulson gets a little a post credit sequence where they're like, Coulson's still here. You kind of take the bite out of that film. So it's unfortunate that unfortunately the news cycles and everything works the way that they do. They sort of spoil things ahead of time, and most of the audience won't know that. They're not watching the trades or whatnot. But for those diehard fans who are into all of this stuff, it's a little bit of extra knowledge that might sort of take the piss out of the film. But I think with or without that knowledge, I think everything else still flows together, still works together. I think there are a lot of great, like I said, character moments between different levels of characters and whatnot. And watching to see the team, the Task X Force handlers sort of work and operate and see that behind the scenes reminds me a lot of Cabin in the Woods, where they're watching people do things. I love getting that sort of inside baseball style of that too with Amanda and those folks. Amanda's not one to play with, and it's good to see why she's not one to play with. I think once you get past the cold open, you can see why things are set up the way they are, story wise and plot wise. That it's all set up to make her the bad, and once you see that she is the big bad as opposed to whatever we get, I think you'll appreciate this all a little bit more. It is by far, probably upon rewatch, is by far my favorite. I've watched Birds of Prey probably the most about all the DCEU films. This is probably going to be right up there with it. Justice League, I will watch a lot. This Snyder cut of Justice League, I will probably have watched a lot too. It's very long. But this is probably that perfect sweet spot of being vulgar, comedic, heartfelt, and just all encompassing that hits that weird funny bone of what I want in a comic book. And I wish that characters like the Blades or the Punishers could get this type of violent care. We won't never see anything like this existing in the MCU. That's where the DCEU stuff can sort of stand out. Is it can play in these sandboxes that the rules are a little bit taken off when we're not in this big conglomerate of everything has to stack on top of each other, which I love. I'm all in on that. But also, if you give a little bit more leeway where you can kind of do your own thing and be violent, or you can be a romance, you can do you're not tied to anything. It can sometimes become something as refreshing as this is. So on my scale of once is enough, play it against Sam or give me a time zone so I never have to think about this film again. This is a play it against Sam. I think we're going to run this back sometime this week and just kind of let it wash over me. I can't get out of my head some of the character moments. Harley, like I said, spoke about earlier, is one of them, but just the way that Bloodsport sort of reacts in reaction to a daughter that he doesn't really give a shit about or did not care about, but clearly is trying to push her away so she doesn't become like him. There's some character moments in there that really work, and at the end of it all, as big and violent and big and bombastic as this film is, those are the moments that stick with you when you're all said and done. What did you guys think about Suicide Squad? What did you guys think about the Suicide Squad? Go ahead and leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name that's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts. We're there. More than likely, we're going to be talking about this bad boy on the next episode, so go ahead and listen to that whenever we drop it. But like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.